Joe Leaphorn, Zahn McClarnon, had a very confusing spiritual journey in Dark Wind Season 3, Episode 6, and there was so much symbolism and subtext that it likely needs a bit of clarification. Joe has been struggling with visions of the Yietzer in Dark Winds ever since he killed BJ Vines. Most recently, the ending of Dark Wind Season 3, Episode 5 set up a big confrontation between Joe and the monster, which was teased at the start of the season. Dark Winds did not disappoint, as it took an entire episode away from both Bernadette Manuelito, Jessica Matten, and Jim Chi, Kiowa Gordon, to dive into Joe's psyche. Right from the start, Dark Wind Season 3, Episode 6 was confusing. After getting hit with a poison dart, Joe found himself in a dreamscape, a desert wasteland that Margaret Cigarette, Betty and Sosie described as the yellow world where monsters are created. That also came after Margaret explained the pollen path to Joe, which made it clear that Joe was having some sort of spiritual journey. Plenty of weird things happened during Joe's dream, however, and all of the symbolism and metaphors likely need to be explained. Agent Washington's dance with Leaphorn, symbolism and meaning explained. Leaphorn and Washington have been figuratively dancing around BJ Vines and their ideas of justice all season. In the middle of Joe's dream, he was visited by FBI Special Agent Sylvia Washington, Jenna Elfman, and she confusingly asked him to dance with her. Washington has been breathing down Joe's neck and investigating BJ Vine's death all season long, though, so Joe rightly viewed her as an enemy. The most basic way to interpret Washington's dance with Leaphorn is as a metaphor for their relationship. Washington has been figuratively dancing with Leaphorn all season, as they go back and forth on trying to solve and cover up BJ Vine's murder, respectively. On a deeper level, Washington and Leaphorn's dance is symbolic of their opposing views of justice. Washington believes in a very basic idea of justice, one that sees America's laws and norms as having the authority to make justice real. She said as much when she explained that priests and businessmen are good guys. Joe, on the other hand, knows that anybody can be a horrible person, and that the legal system Washington loves often fails Navajo people in favor of white people. The dance demonstrates Joe and Washington's opposing views. Washington is prim and proper, dressed in a gown and following the steps to AT, while Joe is still in his uniform and stumbling over his feet. She's figured out the system, while Joe is still more focused on true justice. If the dance is a metaphor for justice, Washington believes that following the steps and looking the part makes the dance real, while Joe knows that nothing is ever so simple. Emma's vegetables and key scene in Dark Wind Season 3, Episode 6 explained. Emma was trying to tell Joe that he needs to prioritize her more than his duty. Joe had another confusing visitor in one of his dreams, his wife, Emma Leaphorn, Deanna Allison. Joe was locked up in the station's interrogation room when Emma visited him with a crate full of vegetables that had been destroyed by critters, and she was complaining about how he didn't build her a fence. Joe was understandably more worried about being locked up and saving George Bowlegs, so Emma's concerns didn't make much sense on the surface. Joe's dream of Emma, however, symbolizes how he was losing her long before Agent Washington came to town. Emma and Joe have begun to drift apart, mainly because of Joe's decision to kill BJ Vines and his decision to leave Emma in the dark about it. Emma's complaints about the vegetables boiled down to her not understanding why Joe always prioritizes his duties as a police lieutenant over his duties as her husband. That was the main point of Emma's dream sequence. Joe has always cared more about being a servant of justice than anything else. It's why he chose to deliver Indian justice to BJ Vines without consulting her. Joe was more interested in seeing justice served than doing what was in Emma's best interest. If Joe had been thinking of his duties as Emma's husband, he would have told her that BJ Vines had killed Joe Jr., and he would have asked what she wanted to do about it. But Joe was thinking like a cop and a protector of the Navajo people, so he just killed BJ Vines without asking her. BJ Vine's death is certainly the biggest stressor of their marriage, but it's Joe's priorities that are the root of this problem. Joe's dream of Emma was just a different example of how his priorities are interfering in their marriage, even if they are fundamentally good. Joe discovered that his father, Henry, murdered an abusive priest decades ago. Henry's Indian justice completely recontextualizes his relationship with Joe. Henry Leaphorn, Joseph Running Fox, reading a newspaper in Dark Wind Season 3, Episode 3. Throughout his dream sequence, Joe saw a priest he knew as a child, and one who he knew was a pedophile. As Joe remembered, the priest raped his cousin, and Joe told his father, Henry Leaphorn, Joseph Running Fox, about it. As Joe investigated the priest's murder, he discovered that Henry delivered his own brand of Indian justice to the priest decades ago. That revelation in and of itself is huge, but it also completely recontextualizes Joe's relationship with his father. Knowing that Henry killed an abusive priest when he was a police officer makes it a lot easier to understand why he was so supportive of Joe's quest for Indian justice against BJ Vines. Henry already had first-hand experience with the failings of the US legal system. As he explained, no one would have believed a Navajo man's claims about an abusive priest in the 1920s or 1930s. That also explains why Henry has always resented Joe's decision to return to the reservation and become a cop. He didn't want his son to have to make the same decision he did with the priest. How Joe knew that the Yeetzer was just a man, not a monster in Dark Wind Season 3. The bloody human handprint is proof that the Yeetzer is just a man. The Yeetzer looking at Joe Leaphorn while he shines a flashlight on him in Dark Wind Season 3, Episode 5. After his dreams were over, Joe discovered that the Yeetzer that has been haunting him all season isn't actually a monster, but just a man in a costume. Joe chased after the Yeetzer at some point, and he managed to land a shot in the man's shoulder. When he followed the trail, Joe found a bloody but distinctly human handprint, proving that the Yeetzer is a man and Joe isn't actually going insane. While this is a great development for Joe's mental health, it still leaves a massive question: who is posing as the Yeetzer and why?